What is going on? Another Random Card Chronicles back to back. So this one's going to be a little bit different. Not really going to be entertaining, probably informational for some of us. But if you're a gamer, you've been keeping up with stuff, you know PS5 and Microsoft Xbox One Series X is about to drop. You're going to have to get a new game console coming up soon. So I was going on a debate. I was like, man, I need a new one. Do I get an Xbox One X? Because I'm an Xbox guy. Do I start completely over with Sony and build a library with Sony? I don't have any Sony games or anything. Go with, the PS5. Or do I stick with Xbox and go with the new Xbox, the Series X that is coming out? Well, the devs of Sony and Xbox just released some statements and stuff like that. I watched a little bit of the video, but some of the information was actually really good. From what I'm looking at, I've looked at specs and stuff like that, but everything I've heard about both systems don't answer the question, which one should I get? If you're a PlayStation guy, you're going to get the PlayStation. If you're an Xbox person, you're probably going to get the Xbox. Let's just be 100 about it. But in terms of Sony, it's a little bit easier because you don't have a console system in between. So if you're upgrading Xboxes, you could probably go with the One S, the One X, or the Series S that is going to drop here supposedly for the holiday season of 2020. So I'm thinking maybe, doesn't have an official release date, but maybe September, December-ish this year. Hopefully, maybe I hope coronavirus would push it back, but we'll see. So it's some pretty good info that they were talking about. I'm just going to get into it and let y'all decide for yourself. And the rest of the video I haven't really seen. I might not play the whole thing, but we'll see.
Power and features translate into real next-generation games. Jez spoke to Joel Baker, technical director at Hinterland Games. His team has recently delivered the survival game The Long Dark, which focuses on immersion alone in the wilderness within a stylized game world accented by striking lighting and interaction with the elements. Joel said, "The most exciting thing for me is the addition of an SSD and the custom hardware surrounding it to help get data into memory faster. This will make it easier to work with larger data sets that don't easily fit into memory. The addition of hardware ray tracing is also super exciting, but it's how it can be used outside of graphics that will enable the biggest changes. We would be able to simulate physically accurate weather and wind by sending some rays into the world and then having the audio and physics change dynamically based on where the snow is accumulating or melting. These sorts of things are going to allow some really immersive experiences that weren't easily achievable before." End quote. But what about a developer with a long history of developing for other consoles and PC? Kevin Floyer-Lea of Rebellion Studios, the team behind the Visceral Zombie Army series and Sniper Elite series, this team has been able to get their games running at 60 FPS on current consoles. Kevin praised the Xbox Series X, saying, "The Xbox Series X is a genuine and significant boost in performance from the Xbox One. We saw how important both frame rate and resolution were with the previous generation, so it's exciting to be able to deliver 4K gaming at 60 frames per second on a console. The increased processing power means that we will not only be able to offer silky smooth gameplay, but we can actually take that gameplay up a level in complexity. Hardware accelerated ray tracing allows us to take players to environments that are more realistic and dynamic. But ray tracing hardware can do more than just rendering. For example, we can do incredible things with the acoustics to enhance realism, modeling realistic sound and occlusion for AI's hearing in real time, for example, is an incredibly useful feature for creating stealth games. The SSD storage speeds then lets us take those beautiful realistic environments and make them load in a flash, and we're talking about bigger environments than the ones we could create on Xbox One. Now we can support detailed motion capture on a much wider scale, like non-player characters simply doing their thing in the background. Instead of all enemy NPCs moving in an identical way, for example, the SSD storage speeds means we can offer many unique motion captured animations." End quote. One of the most talented studios in the industry and the top of the Xbox Game Studios ensemble is Coalition Studios with Gears of War. Mike Rayner of the Coalition said, "In the current generation, as the fidelity and size of our worlds increase, we have seen increasing runtime I/O demands, which have made it challenging to meet world streaming demands without detail loss. With the new direct storage APIs and new hardware decompression, we can further improve I/O performance and reduce CPU overhead. both of which are essential to achieve fast loading. As we look into the future, the Xbox Series X sampler feedback for streaming is a game changer for how we think about world streaming and visual level of detail. We will be exploring how we can use it in the future titles to both increase the texture detail in our games beyond what we can fit into memory, end quote. Mike proves that with an increased CPU, GPU, and storage solution, as well as bandwidth speeds thanks to Velocity architecture, their Gears world can be bigger and better without spending time reducing scope and managing loading and streaming problems. Gears 5 is already the biggest Gears world ever, and with the new advantages in the Xbox Series X, the next Gears game can be bigger, better, and more packed with enemies and interactions to elevate the experience in one of Xbox's most prolific franchises. Alexander Sabrin of Snowed In Studios, a major third-party support studio that has worked with Deus Ex, Shadow of Mordor, and dozens of other big AAA titles and ports, has spoken up about the Xbox Series X and the hardware-accelerated built-in ray tracing benefits of true dynamic lighting and reflections in next-generation games. He says, "Ray tracing will allow for more realistic and flexible art direction. There is a lot of research around ray tracing that can be leveraged here that could lead to some very interesting concepts. Reflections, soft shadows, refraction, transparency, but what does that mean for graphics? It means that developers are creating new ideas on how to use this tech, pushing the boundaries in a different direction than it's been pushed before." Alexander Sabrin talks about managing CPU clocks and heat, something that game designers have to mind on a variable system like the PS5, but not on the Xbox Series X, which is set to its designed frequency and power draw. He says, "Processing power is always useful to allow developers to create more expansive worlds, more complex interactions, and to improve our ability to include more content into our game."
So basically, if I'm understanding that correctly, Microsoft did a better job at implementing their system, so they didn't have to necessarily incorporate a specific cooling system to keep the system cool when it's running at high speeds, unlike PlayStation. Interesting.
It can also enable developers to spend less time optimizing and spend more time creating. Chip efficiency is also a big deal when it comes to the power wall, end quote. The last bit of information comes from the perspective of years of PlayStation development experience from Chris Grinnell, has spent 15 years working for PlayStation and Guerrilla Games. He said the Xbox Series X is a beast compared to what Sony has put together. "I think Sony has kind of rested on their laurels a bit." He also went on to suggest that Sony were possibly caught off guard with the Xbox Series X specs. He said, "If you look at the throughput and ray tracing capabilities of the Xbox Series X, then you start to understand why developers would be saying it's kind of staggering. So you've got the math, then you start looking at the real-time ray tracing capability, and that's where Sony has been caught off guard. As for ray tracing, there is only one next-generation console, the Xbox Series X, that will be able to do real-time ray tracing. If you look at Cerny's conversation, he kind of skipped over it and didn't really talk about real-time ray tracing. We've seen a very different narrative from Xbox. Looking at the hardware specs, it comes down to the count of CUs, hardware, and Sony hasn't come out and said that they will have all of the RDNA 2 features," end quote. Chris explained his concern with the PS5. He said, "At a developer-centric presentation, Cerny has not targeted what next-generation architecture uses. It's a serious issue that they haven't spoken on variable rate shading. If they're not pushing it except for ray trace audio, it doesn't scream that the PS5 is a ray tracing powerhouse," end quote. This means that we could possibly see major AAA multi-platform games on Xbox Series consoles running with higher performance and real-time ray tracing, while the PS5 version will resort to baked-in conventional lighting and reflections akin to current generation. The performance and visual delta between the Xbox and PS5 will be even further magnified if the PS5 cores use software-based ray tracing, which would lower visual clarity and frame rates in the same games. Simply put, 90% of games on Xbox Series X will have an advantage in not just pixel counts, as we've seen with the Pro and the Xbox One X, but next generation, the visual gap will include performance, immersive lighting and reflections, and much more. This is what we've come to expect from more expensive, more advanced, and better designed hardware on PC and now Xbox Series X. Sony's first-party exclusives will benefit from the super fast SSD and Kraken solution, but multiplats will be largely the same outside of loading speeds comparing the Xbox Series X and the PS5. The Xbox Series X has an incredible advantage of being not only the most powerful console, but the most powerful hardware set in its price range, rivaling top-tier PCs well into the first half of the new console generation. We have no doubt heard some developers speak up that the PS5 is easy to work with and preferred, but games are always targeting the market of mid-level PC and the highest hardware in the mass market. So as next generation comes out on consoles, the overwhelming majority of games will look and play better on the Xbox Series X, possibly with some major titles displaying realistic ray trace lighting and reflections on the Xbox, but not on the PS5. Xbox had to overcome a power disadvantage with the Xbox One early on, and now they are fixing an exclusive games deficit with 15 teams within Xbox Game Studios working on fantasy RPGs, sci-fi, adventure games, racers, shooters from a diverse group of teams across the world. Next Generation is heating up to be one of the best combinations of more games, more power to push visuals, and worlds bigger and better than ever. And all of this is unlocked thanks to the power and tech inside the next Xbox console, and the unveiling for Xbox is coming very soon. This is Colt Eastwood. Thank you so much for watching, and if you made it this far, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you did, write in the comments, astronaut with one arm. Bonus for anyone that gets that reference, you'll be my new best friend. Please don't use Google. I wanted to take this moment to thank a good, close friend of mine, Dealer Gaming. He messaged me 3 years ago when I was at 1,000 subscribers, and he's helped me with my content. Now, I'm nearing 100,000 subs this year if people still watch my videos. His channel is incredible, very tech-oriented, but he explains everything.
Okay, so, I mean, I love giving him a shout-out and everything. I'm going to go like the video and everything. Is definitely appreciation for me. I love it. Yeah, a lot of good information there. Like, I've done specs on PlayStation and Xbox and reading stuff, and honestly, half of that stuff, I don't know what that stuff means. I play games. I don't make them. I just want to know what system should I buy, if I should even bother to upgrade my current Xbox One. From everything and I was leaning towards the Series X. Honestly, everything I've heard about the Series X compared to the PS5, this and that, everything basically tells me to lean towards Xbox. If you are a God of War fan and you got to get God of War, you need the PlayStation. It's an exclusive title. Outside of those specific exclusive titles, which I'm not really keen on personally, I do like Gears of War though. But if you have two systems and basically once you play the same game on one and it's going to play better, faster, smoother, and it's just a better game on one system than the other, I'm going with the gameplay where it's just a better system. So, right now, oh, and you are going to have to upgrade if you want to continue to purchase new games, because anything new coming out that hasn't already been scheduled for release date this year or something like that, all the new stuff is going to be coming out in the next 5-6 years. All that's going to be on the two new platforms, so you're going to have to get a new one anyway. So you might as well get on that Microsoft bandwagon, come on over to the X, where we do real things and play real games. That being said, Random Car Chronicles, y'all have a good one.